The House of Shadows. Richard Hamilton was a man who had everything money could buy. From the rooftop of his penthouse in Manhattan, he could look down on the entire city, the rivers of cars glowing in the night like veins of light, the skyline glittering like a necklace scattered across the black. He had built an empire in technology, turning a small startup into a corporation that dominated the global market. People described him as brilliant, unstoppable, a man whose decisions could tilt Wall Street in a single afternoon. Yet, inside the walls of his lavish home, Richard felt powerless. No fortune could change the truth he faced every day when he heard the sound of his children's footsteps fumbling against the padded floors. Michael and Gabriel were his 7-year-old twin sons. To the world outside, they were heirs to unimaginable wealth, the children of a man who had conquered the business world. But to Richard, they were fragile souls locked inside eternal night. Born blind, they had never seen the face of their father, never glimpsed the colors of the sky, never witnessed even the faintest outline of the world others took for granted. Richard had flown them to specialists in Boston, London, Zurich. He had signed checks worth millions for surgeries, treatments, and experimental therapies. Every time the doctors shook their heads with rehearsed sympathy. The condition was permanent. The nerves that carried sight to the brain were undeveloped. Nothing could be done. When his wife Marina died during childbirth, Richard had told himself he could endure the grief, that at least he still had their children. But when the diagnosis came, when he realized they would never open their eyes to the world, something inside him shattered. He poured himself into work, buying every machine, every device, every therapy he could. Still, night clung to his boys. His empire grew, but at home, silence settled heavier each year. He kept the curtains drawn, telling himself it was to protect them from reminders of light they could never see. Yet deep down, it was his own despair that sealed out the sun. On most mornings, the twins sat in silence on the velvet chairs of the family room, rocking themselves back and forth. Their world was filled with sound and touch, but it lacked laughter, and the silence between their giggles grew wider with each passing month. The nannies cared for them with polite efficiency, the tutors followed schedules, the doctors checked vitals, but none of them truly reached the boys. Richard watched helplessly as the house became a mausoleum of sorrow. It was on one such morning that Isabella Johnson walked into the Hamilton home. She was not who Richard expected when he had asked the agency for another housekeeper. She was younger than most applicants, slender, with calm brown eyes that seemed to hold more weight than her simple resume revealed. Her clothes were neat but plain, her sneakers scrubbed but worn. When the guard directed her to the service entrance, she had lifted her chin and replied softly, "I'm here for an appointment with Mr. Hamilton." Something in her tone silenced the casual dismissal, and she was shown upstairs. Richard had little interest in interviews anymore. The house ran like a machine, managed by Celia Carter, his longtime house manager. But he appeared out of courtesy, leafing through Isabella's papers as though they were another contract to sign. 3 floors, 12 bedrooms, a library, 2 offices. Her duties would be endless, yet the rules were clear. She was not to interfere with the children's therapy. He spoke the rule with the sharpness of a man who had seen hope turned into a knife too many times. Isabella nodded politely, but inside her chest stirred memories she had long buried. She had once cared for her younger brother, a boy born with low vision. She had taught him sound games, orientation tricks, how to play with contrast and rhythm. She had watched him laugh at simple discoveries, learning that blindness was not the end of joy. But he died in an accident at 15, a wound she carried every day since. She had promised herself that if she ever met another child trapped in darkness, she would not stand aside. That night, alone in the small staff room she had been given, Isabella opened an old wooden box she always carried. Inside were scraps of memory, scribbled notes, tactile cards, a toy that clicked when spun, a flashlight she had once used to teach shadows. She placed them carefully on the desk, whispering to herself that she had not come only to clean rooms. The next morning, she entered the family room with her cleaning tools. Richard walked past on the phone, barely nodding. Martha, the nanny, sat on the sofa scrolling through her device while Michael and Gabriel rocked quietly in their chairs. The room felt heavy, the curtains sealed tight against the morning sun. Isabella sprayed a bottle across the polished table, and the sound of the mist breaking the silence made both boys lift their heads. Their ears were sharp, every sound a clue in their dark world. She smiled gently, though they could not see. "Hello," she whispered, her voice soft as if speaking to shadows. "I'm Isabella. I came to make this room clean and fresh." Michael tilted his head, his face turning toward her with uncanny accuracy. "Where's Martha?" he asked in a small voice. "She'll be right back," Isabella replied. "Do you want to help me listen to the sounds?" She sprayed the bottle again, making a rhythm. Gabriel giggled, the sound breaking like a tiny spark in the gloom. Michael tapped his fingers against the chair's arm, matching the rhythm. The air shifted. For the first time in weeks, laughter escaped into the room. Isabella's heart clenched. She saw not hopelessness but possibility. She did not say it aloud, but in that moment she made a silent promise. She would not let these boys drown in despair. She glanced at the curtains, heavy and suffocating. Perhaps, she thought, the first step was not to bring light to their eyes, but to their hearts. That day passed with small games, call and response with taps, echoes of footsteps across the rug, clapping in patterns. The boys followed her sounds eagerly, laughing when they guessed her position correctly. Richard, hearing faint bursts of laughter from his study, paused with his pen in midair. He had not heard that sound in years. He stood at the door silently, watching Isabella crouch between the boys, her hands guiding their rhythm. Something stirred in him, half hope, half fear. He turned away quickly, whispering to himself that he must not allow illusions. Yet the echo of laughter followed him long after he closed his office door. That night, Isabella sat in her room, her box of tools spread before her. She touched the cards, the toy, the flashlight, and thought of her brother. Tears pricked her eyes, but she smiled through them. Tomorrow, she decided, she would open the curtain just a little, not enough for the staff to notice, just a sliver of light. For children who had never seen, even the smallest crack could become a doorway, the first light. The next morning, Isabella woke before the others. She sat on the edge of her small bed, fingers resting on the old wooden box she had carried from home. The memories it held weighed heavily on her, but today she felt something different. Yesterday, for the first time, she had heard the boys laugh. It had been a fragile sound, like the first crack in ice, but it had pierced through the thick silence of the Hamilton household. That laughter had been more powerful than any paycheck. She whispered to herself that today she would go one step further. The house rose with its usual rhythm, Celia checking lists, Martha preparing breakfast with her sharp, impatient voice, Richard moving briskly in his dark suit, always on the phone. To anyone else, it was an ordinary morning. But to Isabella, the moment carried weight. She entered the family room where the twins sat waiting. Michael was humming softly, and Gabriel tapped his foot against the padded floor. Their world was still locked in darkness, but they were eager for her presence. "Good morning, my friends," Isabella greeted warmly. She sprayed her bottle once more, letting the sharp mist carry through the air. Both boys turned their heads, smiling. She could feel their hunger, not for food, not for toys, but for connection. She guided them into a game she had prepared the night before. She placed a small toy top on the table, spinning it with a click that echoed against the wood. The boys leaned forward, listening closely. Gabriel laughed, reaching out toward the sound. Michael followed, their fingers brushing the moving toy. They could not see it, but they could feel its vibration through the surface. Isabella smiled. "That is the sound of motion," she explained gently. "Things move, and we can hear them. Do you want to try?" She guided their small hands to spin the toy themselves. The clicking grew louder, faster, and their giggles filled the room. The game was simple, but to them it was discovery. To Isabella, it was proof. Darkness did not mean emptiness. Richard passed the doorway that morning, pausing at the sound. He leaned silently against the frame, unseen by Isabella. He watched as she crouched beside his sons, speaking to them softly, her face lit with genuine care. He felt something twist inside his chest. It had been so long since he had seen anyone reach them this way, yet his instincts recoiled. He had heard this before: laughter, hope, only for it to end with another doctor's disappointment. His jaw tightened, and he turned away before she noticed. But a thought followed him to his office. What if, just this once, it was not false hope? Later that afternoon, when the house was quieter, Isabella stood before the heavy curtains. Her hand trembled as she reached for the fabric. She remembered Richard's warning, his rule never to interfere with the children's therapy. But she also remembered the way their faces lifted at every new sound. Slowly, carefully, she pulled the curtain back an inch. A single blade of light cut into the darkened room. It fell across the floor like a golden path. The boys froze. Their ears had caught the sound of fabric moving, but their faces turned toward the warmth that touched their skin. Michael tilted his head, his lips parting slightly. Gabriel stretched his small hands into the beam, laughing in surprise. "It feels warm," he whispered. Isabella's heart swelled. "That is sunlight," she said softly. "It has been waiting for you." They reached out eagerly, their fingers exploring the golden warmth as though it were a new toy. Their eyes, still clouded and unseeing, widened at the sensation. They could not see the light, but they could feel its presence. For the first time, Isabella allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they're wowed. As more to discover. When Martha entered suddenly with a tray of juice, Isabella quickly let the curtain fall back into place. Martha frowned, suspicion flickering in her eyes, but she said nothing. Isabella knew she would have to be careful. That night, Richard found Michael and Gabriel humming together on the staircase. They were repeating rhythms Isabella had taught them earlier, clapping and answering each other in patterns. For years their play had been silent and withdrawn, but now it carried laughter and energy. Richard called softly, "Boys?" They turned their faces toward his voice, smiling. He froze at the sight. He had seen them smile before, but never like this, never with such life. "Did Isabella teach you that?" he asked carefully. "Yes, Daddy," Gabriel replied proudly. "She makes the dark fun." Richard's throat tightened. He turned quickly away before they saw the tears in his eyes, though they could not see them at all. Alone in his study later, he sat with his head in his hands. For years he had thrown money at experts, chasing miracle cures, yet here was a woman with nothing but a spray bottle and a toy top, and she had given his sons laughter. It was something no doctor had managed. Still, fear gnawed at him. What if this joy ended in disappointment? He told himself he must protect the boys, protect their fragile hearts. Yet another voice, quieter but insistent, whispered that perhaps the real danger was not allowing them to hope at all. The following days unfolded with small miracles. Isabella played games of sound, touch, and rhythm. She taught them how to clap in echo against the walls, how to tap patterns with spoons on the table, how to guess where she was standing by the sound of her steps. Every game ended with laughter. Slowly the house began to change. The silence that had once filled its halls was replaced with giggles, clapping, and soft singing. Even Celia, the strict house manager, found herself smiling more often. But beneath the joy lay risk. Richard's rule loomed over Isabella like a shadow. She knew that if he discovered her disobedience with the curtains, she could lose her position. Yet every time she saw the boys' faces light up at the warmth of the sun on their skin, she felt it was worth it. One evening, as she tucked them into bed, Michael whispered, "Isabella, what does light look like?" Her throat tightened. She chose her words carefully, her voice trembling with emotion. "Light is like laughter, but for your eyes. It makes everything brighter, softer, more beautiful. Even the darkest night ends when light appears." The boys smiled, holding her hands tightly, and in that moment, Isabella knew that no matter the risk, she would keep pulling back those curtains, inch by inch, until light filled their world. Cracks in the darkness. The days passed in small steps, but each one carried a weight that the Hamilton home had never felt before. The air, once thick with silence and grief, now carried traces of laughter and playful sounds. For years, Richard had moved through his house like a man in exile, careful not to hope, careful not to feel, afraid that any spark of joy would be smothered by disappointment. Yet now, he found himself pausing outside the family room door, listening to the rhythm of his son's laughter. It was as if Isabella had changed not only the twins, but the very walls of his home. Michael and Gabriel were blossoming in ways no doctor had predicted. They still could not see, their eyes clouded in milky haze, but they were learning to map the world through sound and touch. Isabella taught them how to play sound tag, moving across the rug while they chased her by following the direction of her footsteps. They learned to clap in patterns, to repeat rhythms on tables and walls, to pain with sound by creating echoes in the hallways. Their world of darkness had begun to crack open, not with sight, but with joy. Yet not everyone was pleased. Martha, the longtime nanny, had grown resentful. For years she had cared for the boys in the strict routine Richard demanded, but she had never managed to reach their laughter, never broken through their isolation. Now Isabella had done in weeks what she could not do in years. Every giggle, every smile, every clap felt like a judgment on her failure. She carried her resentment quietly, but Isabella could feel it in the sharp looks and clipped words. "Don't fill their heads with nonsense," Martha muttered once when Isabella encouraged the boys to imagine colors through sound. "They don't need hope that will never come true." Isabella smiled politely, but said nothing. She had learned long ago that sometimes silence was the most powerful answer. In her heart, she knew hope was never nonsense. Even if the boys never saw light with their eyes, they could still feel its warmth with their hearts, and that mattered. One afternoon, Isabella tried something bold. She brought the boys to the grand hallway, where the marble tiles stretched out in a long, echoing path. She clapped her hands, letting the sound bounce. "Do you hear that?" she asked. Michael tilted his head, listening closely. Gabriel smiled. "It's big," he said softly. "That's the sound of space," Isabella explained. "When you clap in a small room, the echo is close. But here, it's far away. That's how you can tell where you are." She guided them, letting them walk slowly down the hall, hands brushing the walls, feet tapping gently against the marble. They laughed as their claps bounced like invisible balls around them. Richard watched from the balcony above. His heart pounded as he saw his sons move with confidence he had never imagined. For years, they had been confined to padded rooms and soft chairs, afraid to stumble. But here they were, exploring the house with joy. He gripped, the railing torn between wonder and fear. Could this really last? Or was it only a fragile illusion that would shatter like all the others? That evening, after the boys were asleep, Richard called Isabella into his study. His voice was calm, but his eyes carried the storm inside him. "Miss Johnson," he began, "I've noticed changes in my son since you arrived. They are happier." He paused, his jaw tightening. "But I must ask, what exactly are you doing with them?" Isabella met his gaze steadily. "I'm giving them what they have always deserved, sir. Not pity, not silence, but a chance to play, to laugh, to discover the world through sound, touch, and warmth. They may not see with their eyes, but they can still live fully. I only want to help them feel that." Richard leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "And the curtains?" he asked suddenly, his eyes narrowing. Isabella's heart skipped, but she kept her voice calm. "Sometimes," she admitted, "I let in a little sunlight. They cannot see it, but they can feel it. It makes them smile. It gives them something new." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Richard's face hardened, but then his eyes softened, and he sighed deeply. "You broke my rule," he said quietly. "But I cannot deny what I've seen. They laugh now. They move. For years they only sat in silence. You've done what money could not." He looked away, his voice trembling. Do you know how much I've spent trying to give them sight? Millions. And yet you, with nothing but sunlight and sound, have given them more than all my doctors combined. Isabella's eyes softened. Sometimes healing doesn't come from money, Mr. Hamilton. It comes from connection, from believing in what is still possible. Richard studied her for a long time. Finally, he nodded. Very well. Continue your work. But be careful. Their hearts are fragile. If you raise their hopes too high only for them to be crushed, I don't know if they could bear it, and I don't know if I could either. From that day forward, Richard began to watch more closely. He lingered near the doors when Isabella played games with the boys. He joined them once, clapping softly in rhythm, and the twins squealed with delight when they recognized his sound. For the first time in years, Richard felt like a father, not just a guardian of their pain. But shadows still lingered. Martha's resentment deepened. She whispered to Celia that Isabella was overstepping, that she was filling the boys' heads with dangerous ideas. Celia, loyal to Richard, kept her doubts quiet, but the tension was growing. Isabella could feel it in every cold glance, every tightened silence when she entered the room. She knew a storm was brewing, but for now, she focused on the boys, believing that love and laughter were stronger than resentment. One night, as she tucked them into bed, Michael reached out and touched her hand. Isabella, he whispered, sometimes I feel like the dark is not so heavy anymore. Do you think, one day, we could see? Her throat tightened. She looked into his clouded eyes, filled with innocent hope. She chose her words carefully, her voice soft. I don't know, Michael, but I do know this. You already see with your hearts, and that kind of vision is more powerful than anything. He smiled, squeezing her hand, and as she watched them drift to sleep, Isabella made a silent vow. She would not stop until she gave them everything she could. Sunlight, sound, laughter, and hope. No matter the risk, no matter the resistance. The breakthrough. The Hamilton home had always been a place of silence, a house where curtains smothered sunlight and heavy footsteps echoed down marble halls. But since Isabella had arrived, that silence was changing. Laughter drifted up the staircases. Rhythms of clapping echoed through the corridors. Even the staff noticed that the boys, once withdrawn and silent, now played together with bubbling joy. Yet not every ear welcomed the sound. Martha, the nanny who had tended the boys for years, grew increasingly bitter. She had been loyal to Richard, following his strict rules, keeping the house in order, enforcing the therapies as the doctors commanded. And for all those years, nothing had changed. The boys had remained quiet, unresponsive, shut in their dark world. Now, Isabella came with her gentle games and her warm smile, and suddenly the children were laughing, moving, and asking questions. To Martha, it felt like an insult, as though her years of effort meant nothing, as though she was being replaced in the hearts of the boys she had cared for since birth. One morning, Martha's frustration boiled over. She walked into the family room to find Isabella spinning the clicking toy top on the table, the twins leaning forward eagerly, their hands reaching toward the sound. Gabriel was laughing, his cheeks flushed with joy, and Michael clapped to the rhythm. Isabella encouraged them softly, her voice full of warmth. Martha slammed the tray she was carrying onto the side table, the glasses rattling. Enough of this nonsense, she snapped. You're filling their heads with foolish games. These boys need discipline, not silly tricks. They are blind, Isabella, blind. No clapping or toys will change that. The twins froze at the sharpness in her voice. Isabella looked up calmly, though her heart was pounding. Martha, she said softly, they may not see with their eyes, but they are learning to see with their hearts. Every sound, every touch, every smile gives them a world bigger than the silence they've been left in. Martha's face twisted with anger. And when you leave? When this hope collapses, who will pick up the pieces? Not you. It will be me, like always. You are giving them dreams that will never come true. Before Isabella could answer, Richard entered the room. His sharp voice cut through the tension. "That's enough, Martha." He glanced at his sons, who were trembling slightly, then at Isabella, who sat steady and calm. He turned to Martha. "If hope is dangerous, then despair is worse. I will not allow anyone in this house to extinguish the light that has returned to my sons. Do you understand?" Martha lowered her eyes, muttering, "Yes, sir." But the bitterness in her heart did not fade. She left the room stiffly, and the twins slowly relaxed under Isabella's reassuring touch. After Martha left, Richard stood silently by the window, his hands in his pockets. For years he had clung to the words of doctors, to the certainty of science. But what he had seen in the past weeks, laughter, play, even the way his boys reached for sunlight, had shaken him. He turned to Isabella. "You've done something here no one thought possible," he admitted quietly. "But tell me honestly, do you believe there is a chance, even the smallest chance, that they might one day see?" Isabella hesitated. She had always avoided false promises. Slowly, she shook her head. "I don't know, Mr. Hamilton. I'm not a doctor. But I believe this. Their blindness does not mean their lives are empty. They can still grow, still feel joy, still live fully. And sometimes the human spirit finds a way where science says there is none." Richard looked at her for a long moment. His jaw tightened, then softened. "Very well," he said. "Continue. Whatever you are doing, don't stop." That night, Isabella decided to take another step. She brought her flashlight from her wooden box. It was small, old, its beam gentle. She knew the boys could not see, yet something in her heart urged her to try. She sat with them in the quiet of the family room after dinner. "Michael, Gabriel," she whispered, "I want to show you something. You may not see it, but I want you to feel it." She clicked on the flashlight, and the soft beam cut through the darkness, landing on the table before them. The boys leaned forward instinctively, their heads tilting. Michael frowned, his cloudy eyes blinking rapidly. Gabriel rubbed his face, then gasped. "It feels different," he whispered. Isabella's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" she asked gently. Gabriel reached toward the light, his small hand trembling. "It's not warm like the sun," he said slowly, "but it makes the dark thinner." Michael blinked again, his lips parting. "I see something. Not shapes, not colors, but something is there." Tears filled Isabella's eyes. Could it be possible? Could their damaged eyes still catch faint traces of brightness? She said nothing, afraid to frighten them, but she guided their hands into the beam, their faces lit with awe. That night, as she left their room, Richard stopped her in the hallway. His face was pale, his voice unsteady. "They told me," he whispered. "They said they felt the dark change." His eyes searched hers. "Is it possible?" Isabella's voice shook as she answered. "I don't know, sir, but maybe, just maybe, their eyes are not as hopeless as we thought." Richard pressed a hand to his face, overcome. For the first time in 7 years, a seed of true hope bloomed inside him. But hope also invited danger. Martha had overheard part of the exchange. In her heart, anger flared like fire. She would not allow this woman to undo everything. She would find a way to prove Isabella wrong, even if it meant tearing apart the fragile hope that had begun to grow in the Hamilton home. The light returns. The Hamilton home had not known hope for 7 long years. Its marble floors, velvet curtains, and golden chandeliers were beautiful to outsiders. But inside its walls, silence and grief ruled. Now, laughter had returned. The sound of the twins clapping, laughing, and humming together filled the rooms like music. But with every sound of joy, Martha's bitterness grew sharper. She had devoted her life to this house, obeyed every rule, carried every burden, and yet she had never been able to bring the boys what Isabella had given so quickly. Resentment hardened into anger, and anger finally into something dangerous. It happened one afternoon when Richard was away at a meeting. Isabella was in the family room with Michael and Gabriel, encouraging them with the flashlight once again. The boys leaned eagerly toward the soft glow. Michael blinked rapidly, whispering, "I feel it. The dark is thinner here." Gabriel clapped, his smile wide. "It's like a star." At that moment Martha stormed in. Her face was tight with fury. "Enough!" she cried, striding forward and yanking the flashlight out of Isabella's hand. The boys recoiled in fear. "You are playing cruel tricks with these children. They are blind. Do you hear me? Blind. Stop filling their heads with lies." Isabella rose quickly, shielding the boys behind her. "Martha, they are not lies. They are discoveries. They are learning to feel light, to explore their world in new ways. Can you not see their joy?" But Martha's voice shook with rage. "Joy that will be crushed. You think you are helping them, but you are setting them up for heartbreak. When you leave, when this ends, they will be broken, and I will be the one left to pick up the pieces." She turned to the twins, her voice sharp. "There is no light for you. There never will be. Stop dreaming." The boys began to cry, clinging to Isabella's dress, and Isabella's heart ached at the cruelty. She stepped forward, her voice firm yet calm. "Martha, enough. You may think you are protecting them, but you are only chaining them to despair. They deserve better. They deserve hope." It was in that moment that Richard entered the room. He had returned early, drawn by a strange feeling in his chest. What he walked into stopped him cold. His sons crying, Martha holding the flashlight angrily, Isabella standing like a shield before them. "What is happening here?" Richard's voice was like a blade. Martha's face paled, but she tried to defend herself. "Sir, I only wanted to protect them from false hope. This woman, she is breaking your rules, filling their heads with dangerous dreams." Richard's eyes turned to his sons. "Michael, Gabriel," he said softly, kneeling down. "Tell me what happened." Through tears, Michael whispered, "Daddy, Isabella showed us something. She showed us light. We cannot see it, but we can feel it. We can feel it in the dark." Gabriel clung to his brother, nodding. "Please don't take it away, Daddy. Please." Richard froze. His heart, long buried under fear, broke wide open. He turned slowly to Martha. "For years, I trusted the rules. I trusted silence, and it gave my sons nothing but sorrow. Isabella has given them laughter, courage, even the faintest spark of hope. If that is dangerous, then it is a danger I choose." His voice thundered now, final and unshakable. "Pack your things, Martha. You will leave this house today." Martha gasped, her eyes wide, but she saw in Richard's face that his decision was final. Trembling with rage and humiliation, she stormed out. The room fell silent, broken only by the soft sobs of the twins. Richard gathered them into his arms, his voice shaking with emotion. "My sons, I am sorry. For so many years, I kept you in shadows, afraid to let you hope, but no more. If there is even the smallest chance, I will fight with you. Together we will face whatever comes." Isabella stood quietly, tears in her eyes. For the first time, she saw Richard not as a weary billionaire trapped in grief, but as a father reborn. From that day forward, everything changed. The curtains were drawn back, flooding the home with sunlight. The twins began spending hours with Isabella, exploring textures, sounds, warmth, and even faint traces of brightness. Their doctors, skeptical at first, were stunned when tests showed tiny, unexpected responses in their eyes. Faint signals of light perception that should have been impossible. No one could explain it fully. Was it science, a miracle, or the simple power of love and persistence? Richard no longer cared. What mattered was this: his children were no longer prisoners of darkness. They laughed, they played, they explored. Sometimes, when the sunlight streamed across the marble floor, Michael would whisper, "Daddy, I feel the light." And Richard, choking on tears, would whisper back, "So do I, my son, so do I." Isabella remained in their lives not as a maid, but as family. She continued to guide the twins, to open their world in ways doctors never imagined. Richard, once a man hardened by despair, became softer, more present, learning from her how to see his children not as broken, but as whole. The Hamilton home was no longer a house of shadows. It was filled with warmth, laughter, and the fragile but unshakable belief that hope was never wasted. And so, in the story of a billionaire's blind twins and a humble maid with a wooden box of memories, the greatest lesson was not about sight, but about vision, the kind that comes from the heart, where light never dies.